Welcome back to The Heat. Next week, the European Union and the government of Afghanistan will co-host the Brussels Conference on Afghanistan. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani will seek continued international financial support for the stabilization of his country. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Ambassador, the Afghan leaders will go to Brussels, that donor conference, early next month. How important is it for them to show unity, to show that they are capable of stabilizing the country?
It's very important because that's what the international community and the donors expect of this government. That's why they supported the formation of this government 2 years ago and have continued to support it both with money and military and political support. This particular conference is important for Afghanistan, especially because of the fact that it still is not able to generate enough revenue. And it has to continue to depend on foreign assistance. And foreign assistance pays for most of the operational and budgetary costs and expenses of the government. So I think that it's important to send a message to the Afghan people that the international community continues to support you. And it's a message to the spoilers or to those who are fighting this government under the name of the Taliban, who basically say that this is a failed government. So for the government, it's important to say that we are not a failed government. We continue to do what is necessary.
Right. Ahmad, what do you make of the fact that the Europeans, as we heard from our reporter at the beginning of the show, have placed a condition on this aid? They say to the Afghan government, you have to agree to take back the refugees, the Afghan refugees who are flooding Europe right now.
I think that's a wrong position to take at a time that security across the country is deteriorating. Many people, some people might be just economic migrant who move to Europe, but a lot of them, they go to Europe because they feel for their life. And I think that's also in violation of the UNHCR and also the international conventions on refugees. That while the Afghans feel persecution at home, feel dead at home, they are being sent back. But having said that, I think that the European Union and the United States should make it clear to the Afghans that they have to be serious about some of the reforms that should improve governance and curb corruption. Because without that, I think that sustainability of the Afghan government and also the Afghan mission will always be just at risk. And conditioning some of the future aid on meaningful and realistic reforms should be on the agenda.
Khalid, what about the way in which aid is being used in Afghanistan? To date, there's been something like $116 billion that have been allocated for Afghan reconstruction. That's more than what the United States spent in the Marshall Plan for all of Europe after World War II in today's dollars. Where has all the money gone?
Well, first of all, when the government in 2001 and 2002 was formed, there was not enough or sufficient capacity in Afghan government to take all these money to implement most of the projects that the international community had paid. But what they did instead, the international community relied on these international firms, where they had very limited understanding of Afghanistan, both administrative understanding of the government as well as the entire country. So that led to some sort of like waste of money. But gradually what happened in this last 15 years, a growing young Afghans educated in the West and East, so they came and took over most of the government ministries, and now they have the capacity and the ability to implement most of the projects. Of course, a lot of money was wasted, and mostly because there was a government, a president who was engaged in some sort of politics and who had no political will to bring reform to Afghan government or the governance. On the other hand, there was a naivety from the international side how to spend the money.
Yeah, because the accusation here in the United States, Ambassador, has been that a large portion of the money has been lost to corruption. In fact, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, recently criticized the US government for sending this money into Afghanistan without any oversight, saying that this is what has been fueling corruption.
Yes, I mean, I think that, first of all, we are not yet at the point to claim that things have been corrected, that there's course correction yet. Secondly, yes, the first 14 years or so have been managed and mismanaged, managed wrongly and mismanaged by the leadership, by Afghanistan's president whose priorities were somewhere else, and by the international community as well. I think that SIGAR's reports, the Inspector General's reports, to a large extent shed light. They may not be totally accurate on some aspects, but they shed light on a big problem, both from a donor's perspective as well as the recipient's perspective. So this is why I'm hoping that in Brussels, there will be some conditionalities, some serious conditionalities applied to aid to Afghanistan, so that we could take care of the corruption as well as the mismanagement and as well as the waste that we have experienced over the last 14 years.
So we will now see oversight.
I am hoping, and I think that the donors have realized finally that you need to have a strict control and supervision of the money that flows into Afghanistan.
Ahmad, we have the European Union involved, we have the United States involved in Afghanistan. What about regional powers? What role do countries like China and India play in stabilizing Afghanistan?
Both India and China have recently become more aggressive in terms of just their policies and engagement in Afghanistan. They largely just play a positive role. India has been a good partner of the Afghan government for the past 15 years. It has implemented a lot of development projects. And I think that if you conduct a survey across Afghanistan, of their view of regional countries, or even just at international level, India might just top the list. And China was very much reluctant in the first 12 or 13 years. It was involved in some economic development projects, in some contracting, but not in the security sector and others. But because China also now has its own problems in its eastern parts in terms of terrorism and instability. So it's very much mindful of the situation in Afghanistan. It doesn't want the Taliban to come back. It doesn't want Afghanistan to revert to chaos where regional and international terrorist groups can just gain a foothold again. So that's why it is working now closely with Afghanistan and also with India and also even with the United States and other international partners to ensure that the Afghan stability is preserved.
Ali, when we look at the international situation right now, and we have the war in Syria and Iraq right now, we have these highly publicized spats between Russia and the United States. Has Afghanistan slipped off the international radar?
Yes, particularly in DC. Yeah, Afghanistan has been like out of the radar of the international community because of the Syria and the Russia. And the United States and Russia's, power politics, I would say too. But yes, it has affected the situation in Afghanistan because there is a rise of international, transnational terrorists in Afghanistan too, like Al-Qaeda is emerging in very highly, as well as ISIS and others, and this has drawn while the international community is involved and engaged in Syria and Iraq and Eastern Europe, but the fact there is a growing threat of transnational terrorists in Afghanistan, including like ISIS as well as the Al-Qaeda, and they all have kind of have had alliance now with the Taliban.
Ambassador, very quickly, I've got 20 seconds. What's your best case scenario for the next year?
I'm hoping that best case scenario will see the national unity government function as a national unity government. I'm hoping that they will bring the much needed reforms in all sectors, and they will focus on security, making sure that we leave the door for peace negotiations open, but we need to make sure we protect the Afghan people and the economy, which is very important to the well-being.
Of course.
And leading to, so the political process leading to elections.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.